Hi guys, it's Susie again here at Natural Beginnings. I'm the lactation consultant, and today I was just going to talk a little bit about pumping. A lot of moms are curious about pumping in general, but one of the questions I get asked the most is, when should I start pumping? Some moms think that they need to have a pump right away, but if the baby's latching on well and things are going smooth with breastfeeding, then you probably don't need to use the pump for the first couple of weeks. If you use it too often and the baby's nursing well in those first couple of weeks, it can actually cause you to have a little bit of an oversupply. So we want to wait for your milk supply to get nice and established before you do a lot of extra pumping. Now this is if the baby's nursing well. If the baby's not nursing well, then you would need to go ahead and start pumping and get the stimulation from the pump if the baby's not giving it to you. So there are certain situations when you would need a pump right away, but most of the time you're good with waiting until later, until you start pumping. At about 2 weeks old, when the baby's about 2 weeks old, a lot of moms notice that their breasts aren't feeling as full and heavy, and they're worried about their milk supply drying up at that point. And that's when your body has kind of regulated to how much the baby's needing. So don't get concerned if you notice that the breasts are softer, but that's about the same time that you would start doing a little extra pumping, because your milk supply is not hormonally driven anymore. It's more of a supply and demand at that time. You can pump in the early AM hours. It's a lot more beneficial to pump in the early AM hours than it is the PM hours, because your prolactin, the hormone that makes your milk, it's the highest in the middle of the night. So when you pump in the early AM hours, your breasts are more full and heavy from the night's exposure to the prolactin. And as the day goes on, then your prolactin levels start to drop. You get a little bit tired, a little bit dehydrated, a little stressed, and then the milk supply kind of dips in the evening. So pumping at 7 a.m. is more beneficial than pumping at 7 p.m. So if you're looking for storing to go back to work or to get a bottle so daddy can feed that evening, then around anywhere between like 6 to 10 a.m. would probably be the ideal times. And to be able to collect a full feeding, you probably would want to pump in between feedings. So if your baby's on more of a regular, I don't want to say schedule because I don't like schedules for babies, but if your baby's kind of on a predictable feeding time, then you can kind of pump in between. So say he nurses at 7 and he's going to nurse again at 11, then 9:30 would be a great time for you to pump, and you should probably get a full enough feeding that when you do pump, you should get a pretty good amount for the baby. It takes about 45 minutes for your body to replenish a feeding for a baby, so you just wouldn't want to pump right before the baby's ready to feed. You'd want to give the breast at least 45 minutes to replenish and make a full feeding for the baby too. Another question that moms ask is when to introduce bottles. And it's kind of the same guideline as the pumping. We don't want to introduce bottles right away. Babies need to get used to breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is they have to learn how to latch and remove milk from the breast a lot more than they need to a bottle. So if you introduce a bottle too soon, then babies are pretty smart. They'll figure out that that's their easy food, and they'll be patient and wait until you break down and give them something easy instead of make them work at the breast. So try to exclusively nurse for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then if you want to introduce bottles, around that age is a good time to do it, around 3 weeks old. And once you do introduce bottles, you probably want to start maybe just 3 a week, 1 every other day. It doesn't have to be something regular. A lot of moms ask me, I'm going to be giving 4 bottles when I go back to work, so shouldn't I be giving 4 bottles now? The answer is no. You just want to get the baby used to a bottle, make sure that the baby's going back and forth well between the breast and the bottle, but there's no reason to overuse bottles in the beginning. Let's wait till you go back to work before we start using bottles on a regular basis. Okay, so once you start pumping, maybe to go back to work, then you will probably want to store your milk, especially if you're getting 12 weeks off, maybe 8 to 12 weeks off for maternity leave. You can start pumping as early as 2 weeks and start putting some of that milk back to save to return to work. If you pump, freshly expressed breast milk is good sitting out at room temperature for 6 hours. So if you accidentally fall asleep after pumping, which I'm sure when you're tired new mom that's possible to do, it's good at room temperature for 6 hours. So once you put it in the refrigerator, it's good for a whole week. If you haven't used it within that week, you can move it on up to the freezer, and it actually freezes for up to a year. Now you do want to be careful where you put it in the refrigerator and the freezer. You want to put it in the very far back where it's the coldest. If it's in the door or up close front to the refrigerator and freezer, then it's not fresh as long. So if you really want to keep it for a longer amount of time, just put it in the back of the refrigerator. So 6 hours at room temperature, a week in the refrigerator, and a year in the freezer. And also, if you're running errands around town and you need to carry the milk around with you, as long as you have an insulated lunchbox with an ice brick that's frozen, it's good for 24 hours. And to defrost the milk, you do not want to try to put it in the microwave. You just set it out at room temperature or run it under a tap of hot water, or you can even take it out of the freezer and put it in the refrigerator and let it defrost overnight like that too. It defrosts pretty quickly, so you don't have to prep far in advance for it. So luckily we have one of our staff members here at Natural Beginnings who happens to be a nursing mom, and she wanted to demonstrate how to use her pump. Before she gets started, I do want to show one piece of the pump. Moms have a lot of question about, is it a good fit, or what size flange do I have, because depending on the brand that you use, these flanges are separate and they come in different sizes. So this brand comes in a 24 millimeter, which is typically a good fit for most moms. The way you know if it's a good fit or not, I'm going to come a little closer so you can see the pump. If you want your nipple to be free floating into the tunnel of the pump, but your areola can push up against the side about 1/4 of an inch past the curve. So your skin your areola tissue can be touching about 1/4 of an inch past the curve, and then your nipple will continue to free float into the tunnel. But if your erect nipple tissue is pushed up against the side and you're filling up the tunnel way out here, then you probably need to get a different size flange. And then, so that's if it's too tight. If it's too large, your nipple will rub the sides. If it's too large, if your nipple is smaller than the flange, then it'll sometimes make a popping sound, or you can hear that it's breaking suction. So that means you need to go down a size, okay? So if it's rubbing, pinching, causing any damage to the nipple, it's probably not a good fit, and you'd want to adjust it a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna let Hannah explain how to use her pump.
Quite easy. We've got, of course, this part of your pump. This is where it's expressed, and it goes into these bottles. It's clearly got it marked as far as your ounces on the side of it for you. So you just hook it up to the tubes that connect directly into the pump and turn it on. There are different settings on there, and you can talk with your lactation consultant about the best setting for you, and it differs as far as whether you're beginning to pump and then whether you've been pumping for a couple months too. And so once it's on, of course you just place it on there and you're good to go.
One thing you want to be careful of is to make sure that you're sitting up straight. If you happen to be leaning back, the milk can start to run down the sides of the breast and you'll leak a lot and it won't go down into the bottle. So sitting up straight, almost even leaning forward a little bit, will help gravity have the milk come down into the bottle. So that's pretty much it. One other thing that I did want to say about the pumps is that there are several different level qualities of pump. There's hospital grade, there's store grade, and there's hand pumps. And I've even recently learned about a pump that's, shucks, I forgot the category of it, but it's pretty much just like a suction cup. You kind of squeeze it, and there's no, as it sits on the breast, it starts to get the air back in it and drain the breast. So that's a new one to me. I have to look into that one a little bit more. But there are different grades of pump. If you have a full-term healthy baby that's nursing well, you're probably fine with just a manual pump. If you're a stay-at-home mom who's mostly breastfeeding, probably a manual pump will be fine for you. If you're a working mom like Hannah and you're counting on a pump several times a week, then you would want to get a higher quality pump. There are several different brands out there. You want to be careful which one you get though. If if the company also makes high chairs and car seats, it's probably not a very good pump to choose. A couple of brands that I like are the Spectra, the Amida, the Medela, and the Hygieia. Those are usually pretty reputable pumps. And then of course there's the hospital grade pump as well. This is for moms who have a baby in the NICU or a baby who's not latching on well at all and mom is exclusively counting on the pump to stimulate the milk supply. She would need a hospital grade pump, which we have those here available at the birth center for rental as well. So I hope that clears up some information for you as far as pumping and storing milk. And if you have any other questions, just give us a call.